It's a small world after all. It's a small world after all. It's a small world after all. It's a small, small world. No, it's not. Not if you read chapter 1 in this book, right? It's a big world. It's over 200 countries in this world. How many countries are you going to be able to visit, spend time in, before your dance on this earth is finished? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, I consider myself to be a pretty well-traveled person. Been to probably 30 countries, but then I compare it to how many countries there are in the world, and I think I've hardly been anywhere at all. 200 countries in the world. And so that's the backdrop as we consider our first way of approaching this subject of looking at media from around the world. Because with 200 countries, can you imagine the variety of media systems that exists out there? And the world is big. Like I said, the world is big. I mean, if you get on an airplane, how long would it take you to fly around the world? It would take you 48 hours, 2 days to make it all the way around the world. So it's a really big country. In fact, across these countries of the world, we have many more languages than 200 countries, than 200 that are spoken. We have 7,000 languages that are spoken in the world. Imagine that, translating that into different media forms. Some languages, like Arabic, are so difficult to reprint in media that it hinders the spread of that language. Arabic is a cursive language, and so when the end of one letter finishes, the next letter has to tie in exactly at the same place. That's what cursive writing is all about. Well, when you print a newspaper in English, they use block letters, right? So you can have an A next to a B, or it would be the other way. You can have an A next to a B, and you can move that B, you can put it in front of the A, etc. You can move it all around. In Arabic, you can't do that because one letter's ending up here, one letter's ending there. So as a side note, it's very difficult to print newspapers in Arabic. At any rate, we're going to learn about media across this great big world. And we're primarily going to focus on 4 media in this class, what we call legacy media. So we'll be studying newspapers, TV, radio, and, well, we'll study a little bit of the internet. It's not going to be a strong focus because when the book was written, it was not as prominent, but we're going to be blending that in where we can. So those are the 4 media that we'll be concentrating on for the most part. And we're also going to study media from the point of view that some media are synchronous, and that means that the two people communicating across the media, let's say it's a TV producer versus the viewer of the TV program, those people are doing it in real time. That's synchronous communication, same time. But then there's also asynchronous communication, like we're doing right now. I'm recording this video, I'm posting it online, you're going to watch it at your leisure. And I might be doing something completely else by that point. I might be in a meeting here at ESU. That's asynchronous communication. So because the world's so big, because there are so many different countries and so many different cultures, which we'll be getting into in chapter 4, the people who grew up in those countries experience media in different ways. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here, is how people experience media if you live in Ghana, if you live in Lebanon, if you live in China, if you live in any country that you want to, you can apply the concepts from this book. Now, those countries that we're going to be studying are selected for a reason. I tried to get countries, first of all, that I felt competent in, that I could write about. So the European ones were the first choice for me, after the United States, of course. So we've got France, Sweden, and the UK. Now, I've been to those countries many times. I've been to the UK probably 30 times. My parents are British, and they emigrated to the US, but they moved back to Britain for a while, and I would go to visit them. I'm teaching this course in Sweden this summer. I've taught it there last year as well in the summer. And France, I've been to lots of times as well. Adding the other countries is a little bit more difficult. I added China. I wanted to have an Asian country. I wanted to have a country that had a completely different political philosophy from the US, so I added China. Then I wanted to have an Arabic and a slightly Muslim country. I say slightly because I ended up choosing Lebanon, which also has a significant Christian population to it, but it's about 2/3 Muslim, so I added Lebanon. And then Mexico, I've spent a lot of time in Mexico. I grew up in Southern California for a brief period, lived in Texas as well, both on the border with Mexico, and I've just had a love affair with this wonderful country, Mexico, for many years. However, these 8 countries also present limitations. They present limitations because we don't have a single country, for example, from South America. We don't have many countries representing the eastern part of Europe, like Russia, for example. So there are limitations to this book. But as I said, this book provides a kind of a blueprint that you can apply to. If you want to study Italy's media system, you can use the concepts in this book. Now I'd like to move on to the importance of comparing as a way of generating knowledge and understanding the world. How do you know if you're short or if you're tall? How do you know if you have light skin or if you have dark skin? Excuse me one moment. The old cold winter day runny nose. Okay, so how do you know those things about yourself? You know those things by comparing yourself to someone else. For example, I know I'm a short person because I stand next to people all the time who are taller than me, except when I'm in Mexico. Then I'm a tall person. I feel like a giant when I'm walking down the street in Mexico. So comparing is finding your reference point. And that is how you compare to other people. And that's what we do in this class. We're going to compare media systems. We're going to discover a point of reference for a subject like nudity in the media, or a subject like violence in the media, or a subject like advertising in the media. We're going to find out what our reference point is by comparing ourselves to others. And when we do this, what we end up avoiding is a term that I coined in this chapter, at least I believe that I coined it. We end up avoiding what I call cultural myopia. Myopia is short-sightedness, If you wear glasses to see long distance, it's because stuff in the distance is blurry. And so you need those glasses. And that's what myopia is. Cultural myopia is when you evaluate something in the distance according to what is close up to you, because that's what's clear. So, for example, if you've never been to England, and you want to talk about the beer, a lot of times people talk about beer in England. Oh, it's warm beer in England. Well, that's not really right. That's an example of cultural myopia because you're evaluating the beer in England by saying, most beer in the United States is served cold. So the beer in England is warm. Well, it's not. It's warmer. And the reason is because most beer in England is an ale beer. And ale is not meant to be served at the same cold temperatures as lager. Ale is to be served around 58 degrees. So it seems warm, but it's not. It's just warmer. Think about that for media as well. When we look at China, for example, and we see a lot of people marching around in military uniforms, we say, oh, that's that communist dictatorship. Well, that's cultural myopia. That's not understanding China by putting on glasses and studying China's military, studying China's media presentation of the military. That's what we're going to be doing in this class so that you can avoid cultural myopia. This book has what I call a rhetorical perspective. Now that's a word that you'll get if you study in our major. Hopefully you'll get it. We even have a class called Rhetorical Perspectives as well as others. And basically what that means is there is no single right meaning for what we're looking at. That it's all up to interpretation. And so what really matters is how you explain your interpretation. And the reason that I introduce the idea of this rhetorical perspective into the book is because we don't want to end up looking at other countries and judging them as being inferior to the United States or superior to the United States. That's not our plan in this class. All we're trying to do is say, look, if we're going to look at how nudity is covered or not covered in media across the world, this is how it's done in this country. This is how it's done in this country. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the outcomes as far as how people are affected by the media presentation of nudity in both countries? It's interpretation. It's not saying, oh, this one is better. They're more moral than us. That's not what we're trying to do in this class. All right, so now we just come to the final part of the video lecture for today, which is the organization of the rest of the book. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be moving next to a chapter that's going to describe a worldwide climate called globalization. And we have to look at that climate because that's influencing everything that's happening across the world, including the development of media systems. After that, we go to a short chapter called Elements of a Media System. And that's where I define what a media system is and break it up into its various elements. From that point forward, for the rest of the book, each succeeding chapter is going to be one of those elements, one at a time. And that's what made my book unique when I wrote it. Because rather than have chapter 1 on China, chapter 2 on the US, chapter 3 on Mexico, etc., and then you get all the way to the end of the book and you forget what was said about China, Instead, I take an element and then I compare it across all of the 8 countries in each chapter. So the very first element that we're going to come to is going to be cultural characteristics. That's chapter 4, cultural characteristics of a media system. So we'll look at the culture in the US, we'll look at the culture in France, the UK, etc., and we'll see how media systems start to grow out of those cultures. Many of you said that that's precisely what you're interested in terms of why you took this class. Now, the book does get dense with information at some point, especially when we get to the accessibility chapter. But the idea was to try and have theory and criticism and practice all in the book, as well as some photos to help illustrate visually what the media systems are like. But we'll get a good sampling of media content in our discussion questions, because I'm going to be sending you links to newspapers and radio and TV, and then generating discussion questions from the content that you get to look at in those links. So that does it for today. It's a bloody big world out there. I hope you get to see some of it. Have a great day.